I myself, the producer of this podcast, is not eligible to diagnose anyone with a mental health disorder. This podcast is purely for artists discussing the mental health hurdles they struggle with on a daily basis. Enjoy. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Where's My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. And today I am with an artist that I met, I would like to say 5-6 years ago, through a friend of a mutual friend. She's obviously a friend of yours, and you've known her for a very long time. I met her, I think, in 2014, 2015. I am with Tristian More.
Hello.
Writer. Do you act?
Actor? I acted as a child.
Okay.
I stopped acting at 18.
Okay, so you're definitely a writer. You work in a part of the industry, I would say, right? Like, would you? Yeah, you work for like the lighting.
I have worked in every aspect of film except for, I've done makeup even.
Nice.
Just as filling in for someone. I've done catering on one project for Adult Swim.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah, it was filling in for someone, but still it counts.
Nice. Yeah.
I worked in art department for 8 years. That's the thing I did the most.
For what? For
all sorts of things, films
nice.
and commercials, and I was an art director on a feature film that another mutual friend, Jeff Susselberg.
Yes,
you were saying he was the DP on. He brought me onto that. A lot of the work that I've done, he's brought me on, or we've just met people that we've been brought on together.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, we were actually joking around this past week, and we shot something, and I was like, yeah, we need art department to dress up the scene, because it was very bland, and we finally, we were able to dress it up and make it look girly enough, because the character Sarah Kozowski, it was her house.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to make it look like a girl lived there, and we were shooting at Jeff's house, and it was a mixture of girl, but it's like Jeff and his like stepsons, and then his fiance, and it's like, okay, if it's dominated by guys, it's gonna look like a guy's house,
especially a teenager and
preteen, right?
Preteen.
Would you say? So but no, thanks Tristan for coming on and discussing. We're talking about two different things we haven't really talked about. Personally, I think I only talked about one of these topics with one other person, and it's writer's block. And I'm going to be breaking the fourth wall, as I do in these episodes, where, if this is the first time you're hearing an episode of Where Is My Mind, I have reached out to, I would post like, hey, I'm looking for artists to go on here. And you were super like nice about, like, you weren't like I want to, like, you were like, hey, if you need someone, do you mind if I come on and talk about it? Most people are like, have me on, or not everyone, but people were just like, I'd love to be on without. And you can kind of see like that they, I'm not calling anyone out specifically, but just like, I think people want to just be on stuff without necessarily like realizing like this is a little bit different.
Giving some thought to it, you mean?
Yeah. Well, I just think like, I think it's, we're talking about how, who knows how deep this is going to go. I've gone very deep with certain episodes lately about how I feel and, the emotions that I'm going through. And I'm, so I want to give my guest essentially like, I want them to feel comfortable. That's why we're recording it at your place. Like, I recorded it at everyone's place except like a few who have come to me. But like, I think going to you is very much, okay, it's a safe space. Like, let's do it, But you were very much like, hey, man, if you have like room for X, Y, and Z, I'd love to talk about writer's block and how that could lead to depression and or like, even the being depressed about other things going on. And you can't break through and write. Like, that's what I'm kind of going through right now. That's what you said you've gone through.
I had a feeling you might, because I feel like we've talked about it before, or you've mentioned something that reminded me of myself. So I also thought that your podcast is probably very good for people trying to get into the industry and want to know what it's like to be put up against a wall and suddenly have a 12-hour day that they don't realize is going to be difficult. And that's 12 hours before overtime.
Yes.
So the first thing I had thought isn't even writer's block per se, but I just always think of the time constraints and everything, and that goes into getting writer's block.
Yeah, we were going to talk about all of it, and you're very much right, because you were, I think if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about like all the outside forces that lead to writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of like what you were thinking,
mm-hmm.
Of doing, and I was like, oh, that's that's an interesting way of looking at it, because I don't think a lot of people think that way. Like, are you writing now? Like, are you?
Technically, no.
No. When you were writing, were you like waking up at like early, like an hour earlier than you would?
Not at all. That's the thing.
Or are you a night owl?
I am a night owl.
So were you like writing at night then?
This is the thing. I would write more at night, but the place I wrote the most was while I drove, which obviously I can't write that down.
Yeah.
And that was what became a problem with me. My mind would flow and I'd be able to write dialogue and more the story of what I wanted to write. And then I'd end up not being able to have time to actually write it down.
Yeah.
Writing shorthand might hurt your arm and take longer, and trying to write it down at a computer, when you're writing out the dialogue you thought sounded good in your head, it ends up sounding terrible when you actually write it down for a second time.
Yeah.
And my biggest problem with writing was doing drafts. And I've written plenty, but then I'll stop because I've gotten to the point where I need to do a second draft.
Yeah.
And so it's getting over that hump of reading it again and wanting to improve on it. And I've just started in the last year or so being able to look at something and say, okay, this line was good. Let's focus on this paragraph and fix that part.
Yeah.
And take a scene and tinker with that scene rather than writing it in order and being happy with it the first time you write it, which
yeah, I felt like
is never the case.
I always got into this mode of like I have to write in chronological order versus like, oh, if there's this idea, like I just come up with this idea and you write it down, and then that's when things can start sparking from it, and it's like, okay, maybe this idea is in the beginning and this is the idea to close it out. But yeah, no, I feel that on like, having like while you're driving, like having like the best movie in your head, and you're
or
like,
epiphany.
I can't write. Yeah, I did that a lot.
Breakthrough of some sort.
There's a few shows I've been watching that I'm like, they're kind of touching on more surrealistic, like surrealism in the sense of like just how weird they are. And I'm like, man, like people like weird. I think people really enjoy like off-colored or off-brand jokes and things of that nature. So it's like, what are some weird ideas I have? And then I come up with it, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then I'm like, wait, what was it? Fuck. Like my
yeah.
And I think we're going to talk about this a lot, and I would like to really dive into it of like how outside stress and forces, for me, and I would love for you to chime in. But yeah, like a lot of the outside forces that aren't in the art really, like, I don't know, I don't want to say I'm stressed a lot, because I don't necessarily think I'm stressed. I just think I have a lot on my mind. I've mentioned this ad nauseum at this point in the podcast, so I do apologize, guys. But it was a really driving force as to why I wanted to do this, with like my stepdad having a stroke. It's like that's filled my brain so much that like I can't create anything. And like my sister is an artist and my mom is an artist in different forms. They're not in film and media, but they're different artists. And I remember sitting with my sister. I was like, man, I can't create anything. She's like, me neither. Like, I just can't find myself to sit down and do that. And I think when tragedy hits, it overtakes everything.
It distracts you, but it also can overwhelm you in the sense that suddenly time has passed and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So it may feel, when did this happen?
In September of 2021.
Right. So that's already 6 months ago, 7 months.
From when we were recording, yeah.
Right. So.
And I can't say I haven't done anything,
because I
said I've done these podcasts and all that, and some can say that they're creative. I don't necessarily think they're creative. I just think it's a way, and I am in therapy, but it's also a way for me to talk with fellow artists and for us to kind of like bond. And every episode I've done, I've left feeling like, okay, I am now closer to that person, even if I didn't really know them or if I knew them a little bit. Like you and I've met a handful of times, and when we have hung out, it seems like we've had, I guess, good conversation,
good time,
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think leaving, after we record tonight, leaving here, being like, okay, that's someone I now trust because it was a safe space. So it's not more so an artistic thing. I think it's more so like maybe the way the podcast comes together is artistic, but I haven't really been able to sit down and write. I feel like the acting I've been in since, what's happened with my stepdad, it's just kind of like, I personally felt like, and maybe this isn't good to out myself, but I felt like I just was going through the motions because they weren't necessarily like challenging roles.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like I'm filling in for background, or I have a throwaway line here or there, right?
That's the thing. I can't even imagine what it'd be like acting since my mother passed away a few years ago, and a friend of mine passed away back in 2009. And that was even, I would say, I was mentioning this before we started recording, but I think that helped me understand what was going on when my mother died, because that happened 10 years before it.
Yeah.
When that happened, it pretty much froze me in place for at least 3 years.
In 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, if I repeat this again, guys, my apologies. But back in 2008 when I lost my grandfather, my uncle, my grandmother, and a good friend of mine, by the fourth person, which was my friend who passed, like, and I'm not saying this to joke around, but it was like I just went to my fourth funeral in a year. Like, it's like, okay, we're at it again. And I went to that one by myself. Everything else was family, but I went to that one by myself. I had my friends come with me, but my mom or no one came with me, like, from my family. So it's just kind of like unfortunately, you're used to it, as fucked up as that may sound, but like, I've dealt with all that when I was almost 20. I was about 20 years old, and then 12 years later, I meet my wife, and she has to go to a funeral, and I go to her, and this is like kind of her first funeral she's ever really gone to as an adult, and I'm just there, and she's like, "Oh my God, like, you're so brave." I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not bravery, it's just I've been there.
You understand what it feels like now.
Yeah, and so you're saying that, like, what happened in 2009, that set you back 3 years, but also you're, at the time you were 33, right, when your mom passed, I'm assuming?
Yeah. 32.
32. So you were a lot older and wiser.
Yeah, I turned 33
honestly.
right after.
Okay, you were a lot older and wiser. You were a lot more mature. So although it was your mother, you were still able to kind of like...
And we saw it coming, at least. That helps as well. You know how Alex Trebek passed away and the whole world grieved it?
Yeah.
It helped make it better. If he had just had a heart attack and died, I think it would have been so shocking.
I think that's how it was with Chadwick Boseman. But he
Same
hit it.
thing. I heard about both in the same location at a train station, actually.
Wow.
So I think of both of them in the same
when you're
thought,
there,
too.
Yeah, so, and it's, you kind of seeing it now, like, I don't know, that designer, Virgil, he's big in the hip-hop community. Virgil, I'm going to butcher his
he just passed away
Abloh,
a month or two ago?
Yeah, he was working while, like, you see it where these artists or these celebrities, if you want to call it, or even people maybe in our own life that we don't really hear about, but like Chadwick Boseman, like, worked until he couldn't work anymore, and people made funny, like, fucked up memes about it. Like, we're like, oh, the Wakanda Forever's taking the life out of him. No, he's fucking sick, and he did 4 movies while he was sick.
I don't want to conjecture, but I remember hearing that his wife had said he thought he would beat it as well. So that's what happens to people that are sick. You don't want to die,
no,
necessarily, and so you think you'll be able.
You're going to have that confidence,
And of course, being able to make something like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it's worthwhile even if you're sick.
Exactly.
I know Pete Postlethwaite went through The Town, and he looked sick.
Yeah.
But I know from interviews he wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So they sort of remind me of each other because I think they passed away from the same cancer. So
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on that. So don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure
cite
either.
me on that. But
if I could fact check that, and the beautiful thing about editing is I could slice it out. But no, I think it's interesting how people, while having, grief going on in their life, how they handle it. So you said that, like, in 2009, it set you back, or I forgot how you specifically said it, but like for 3 years.
It froze me for 3 years.
Froze you for 3 years. That's a perfect way of saying it, because
at least
I don't think it's a setback. I think it just, you're like kind of stuck in time. And I don't know if you felt this way maybe recently. And I don't want to keep talking about it. If you don't want to talk about it, we really don't have to. But when my stepdad, like, I don't really remember much before my stepdad's like stroke, in the sense of like how my day-to-day life was, because it's never been the same. Like my mom is now a caretaker. Like I could be considered a caretaker, because I'm there helping her once a week. For a while I was really doing that. Then things I got married, and we had our second wedding kind of thing, and things have happened where I couldn't have been there every week. But from September until about March, I was there every Monday helping him out, helping him through a lot of things I didn't think I had to. And this is a man who, biked 100 miles 2 weeks before, and like played golf, and like was a handyman. Like, so you see all that get ripped away, and you kind of like,
I'm guessing he's immobile.
He can walk.
Degree.
He can walk.
Okay.
His right arm, he can't move much.
Okay.
But yeah, in 7 months he's actually up and walking, like on a cane, with a cane on his own. Yeah, it's amazing the fight he had. But you just kind of see, like, man, like it's like you kind of see it almost in front of you, like, of things that you have probably been, like, for me anyway, what I've been taking for granted, right? So
I will say it was different, obviously, and this may be the 10 years of education or experience, but I will catch myself thinking, what's the point? Because my mother isn't here anymore.
What's the point of, like, if
doing something creative? Because I always wanted
was she
her
your
to
driving
see,
force?
Not 100%, but
yeah.
Neither was Max per se. This friend that passed away in 2009. But it's different when he was 23, mom was 63, and they obviously have different relationships with me. But I don't necessarily catch myself shocked that he's gone, and maybe that's the distance in time it's been.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same with your friend, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like a real, and I think a lot of people might feel this way. Like, there's times where I don't want to say I forget, but it's like it's been so long without them that, like, maybe this is the world we live in, where it's just like the fast pace of how everything seems to be speeding up and fast paced until it's going to eventually just like go so fast that it just stops, if that makes sense, right? So, it's been 14 years, if my math is correct. You always wonder, like, I always wonder, like, what my grandfather was a teacher, phenomenal musician, phenomenal artist. Like, him and my grandmother are the reason, and she's still around, thank God, but they're the reason I got into movies. So I remember showing her my first short film from college, which was absolute garbage. But she was like still proud of me that I did it, So I'd send her projects here and there, but I always wonder, like, oh, how would it be if he, I would love to be able to pick his brain, because he was legit like a very, very smart man.
That's mostly what I miss, not being able to pick her brain about what could come. She would talk to me about certain things that I want to write, but now I can't have her read a script anymore.
Yeah, and before I found my wife, I was always relied heavily on sending stuff to, like, my parents and all that, just because it was like, I need that like reassurance of, it's good, even though it might not be, because your friends will be
parents.
Like, it's shit. Yeah, exactly. But no, it's you you miss certain things, and I feel like I'm missing a lot. And although my stepdad's still here, so I don't, I feel like I sound like an asshole because I'm talking to someone who lost his mom, and you want all that time back. And I've had a few of my good friends in the last 2 years lose a parent, and my mom was like, "This is your 30s are a really fucking weird time, because it's like your friends or yourself have parents old enough to where they could possibly pass away, and it's just a weird time in your life."
Yeah,
and I thought she was bullshitting me until, like, started happening, you know? So it's like, fuck, you know, like.
Well, that was the funny thing when you mentioned the 4 funerals in a row. I'm realizing now, I had about 8 to 10 funerals in a row for a couple of years. That may have been what really froze me in place. And what was happening was
it family? Was it friends? Or was it?
I grew up in a community theater. My parents met in a community theater in Piscataway, New Jersey. And so
so they were artists.
Right.
That's
so
awesome.
They were acting. Dad actually met her because his roommate was directing the play she was stage managing. And
was he was he the lead, or was he?
The director, Gary Levine, needed. I don't know why I'm saying his
name. That's all right.
The director needed a dead body. It was a murder mystery, and so Dad came to be the dead body.
That's awesome.
And that's how we met my mother. She acted much more than him.
She acted, okay.
Yeah, and she directed.
Is a stage manager a director essentially, or no?
No,
I don't know anything about theater, so
okay.
you can educate me.
You know, film. It's like the assistant director, essentially.
All right.
So what will happen?
And then he was an extra.
Yeah,
essentially. Okay, all right.
Because he doesn't have lines.
Yeah.
So essentially, she would be the one guiding all the actors when it's their cue in case they're late. Gotcha. Or making sure the lights are going.
And he was just probably turned on the charm, and was that it?
I guess.
Well, I mean, he was a dead body. Oh yeah, he was a dead body. So something must have.
I know that they heard that their 2 friends were going to see another show, so that was his way in. That's all I know.
Nice. Okay. So, all
right. It was just everyone was friends in the community. All the theaters that are around Central Jersey, you know each other, and so they just kept running into each other.
That's pretty cool.
But a lot of these friends are their age. So a lot of those people were starting to pass away, or people older than them that I had acted with as a child. So they were, say, 50 when I was born.
And they've known you since you were a kid.
Yeah. So then, or I knew someone that passed away that had lupus.
Yeah.
I knew someone that passed away from a heart attack, but they were probably 50. So that's a bit too young. But it just kept happening one after the other, and I, like you, got used to going to a funeral. I had a suit that I would wear to all of them. Yeah. So it felt comfortable, which it shouldn't. But then again, it is supposed to prepare us for all of these people passing away. What if you are the last person of all your friends to survive? Yeah. This sort of preps you for that. And so I thought of that.
Yeah, I don't even think about any of that stuff too. Yeah, like, you know,
I think I think a lot about too much about death, but
well, not for nothing. It's still fresh in your head. Like 2019 was a stone's throw away.
Yeah,
you know, and you know, I don't know how, if you know, you were able to grieve properly during COVID, in the sense of like going to see your father, or you know, going to where, you know, you said she was cremated, correct? Yeah. So like, but I don't know if you were able to.
Yeah, we never buried her. So
yeah.
she's
So
just
I'm saying, so there's no
house.
place to like go and like see her, essentially, you know. But yeah, you know, when anything like that happens during COVID, it's like, it's not really necessarily normal, because you have to, you know, it felt like forever where you had to be inside and be away from people.
I feel so much worse for people that couldn't have weddings or funerals during the pandemic, because at least we had that. And I think Dad and I are both grateful that she passed away before the pandemic started, because for the last year, it was always something would come up and she'd have to go to the hospital just to check on something. Yeah. And it would take forever. And so, and you
weren't, when my stepdad had this, only one
impossible.
person in the, at one point for him, there was one person in the room a day. So like, I'd go, my sister flew up from Florida to come visit. I'm not going to hijack her fucking time. So it's like, there'd be a few days without me seeing him. And it's like, you know, my mom found him, that's worse. But I mean,
right.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's not easy going through it. And you know, I don't know. I really don't know. You know, I always wonder, like, you know, how it would have been if he didn't have a stroke. Like, would I've, you know, would I just be making more projects? Would I be more like, would I just be happier? Because I don't necessarily think I'm, and you know, I hate saying this because, like I said, I have a baby girl on the way, and I have a loving wife, and she's understanding, of course, but it's like, it's tough to see. I don't, and not to get super personal.
No,
Or
that's
anything.
fine.
I'm not religious.
We got very personal very quickly.
Well, we did, but I'm not religious. I'm not a religious person. I don't, and I lost my faith that year. I lost everyone because everyone would tell me, pray, pray, pray. You would.
Interesting, yeah.
And nothing got answered. Like, nothing got answered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think personally, and I try not to talk about religion a lot, but you hear, everything happens for a reason. I don't think, kids at 5 or 6 dying of cancer. What's the reason for that?
Sure.
So that's where my head's at. And this is the first time I must be just talking with you, but that's my first time ever saying that out loud because that's how I really,
it's interesting,
really believe in it. But like I said, my wife is religious. My wife, her family goes to church, and my wife's like, if I want to bring our daughter to church, I was like, that's you, but I'll go like when I need to, but I'm not going to bring her every Sunday because how can I bring her knowing I don't believe in any of that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not going to you pretend, and maybe that sounds stupid. I don't know.
It doesn't to me.
Yeah, but so where the fuck was I going with that? Essentially, I'm just basically saying like, yeah, it's just tough for me like right now to like believe in a lot of stuff, and I don't know if you went through that either.
Well, it's interesting you bring it up. Last year I went through a pseudo crisis of faith, but it didn't have anything to do with death. One of our other friends lost his faith when Max passed away in 2009, but
did you?
I did not. I went.
Did any of your other?
It.
Did anyone else?
I think this other guy was the only other one that had any faith at the time, and I tend to. Now, growing up in theater, you find people that are probably atheist, that are other religions than Christian, specifically, at least in this area, especially in this area. It's very diverse in New Jersey.
Yes.
So I think I grew up accepting of other people's faiths, and
I am too. I'm not going to, if people believe in going to church all night, I'm not going to be like, well, you're fucking wrong, and I'm not going to be friends with you. If you respect my thoughts and ideology, I will respect yours as well. Same with like politics and too, like, whoever you vote for, like if it's mutual or not mutual, but if it's like kind of copacetic, and if you're not like kind of shoving it down my throat, then I will respect it. But I don't need to be like, well, you voting for that person or you believing in that, I mean, that makes you wrong. No, it's like, that's what's great about being a human being. We can have different, even down to the simple of like, I'm going to look at your movie collection. I love it or I don't like it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could like the stuff you have. I could like your, the stuff you don't have. But at the end of the day, I would still think that we would still be friendly.
Right.
That's how I think things should be, even down to the minute, like music, movies, shows, all that shit.
Right.
But I cut you off. I apologize.
I'm trying to think of what I was going to say
about you had a recent like surgence in faith, but it wasn't about. You said it wasn't about death.
That's essentially what I was going to say. Yeah. It's as long as the religion isn't hurting people, and all that's happened in the last 5 years is that a lot of the evangelical Christians have been going towards a very hateful path.
Yeah.
And so I found that a lot of people that still want to believe, that are our age, don't like how the elder Christians are acting.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to go into it much further, but I've been trying to go on a path on my own to discover what it means to be Christian in America in 2022.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it a big project. I started keeping a journal because a friend of mine from high school he went into the seminary and had a crisis of faith of his own at the end of his time in seminary, and discovered he wanted to go into the Jesuit sect of Catholicism, which is what the Pope is.
Yeah.
And it's a very giving sect of Catholicism. I'm not Catholic. I grew up Southern Baptist specifically, but I then went to a Catholic university. Just happened.
Yeah.
It was the only school I got into. And so I come from a place that was, I grew up in the theater, but also in the church. And so
that's an interesting,
you get a lot of different things.
Because everyone in the theater is very,
liberal.
Yes. Yeah. Very liberal.
But a lot of people in church are conservative. But
well, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
If you go with stereotypes.
Exactly, so, but it's an interesting, yeah, it's just kind of interesting when tragedy happens, like what your brain goes through, and for me, I kind of just wish like my brain would like just take a break so I could sit and write.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like I know
we went off on a long tangent,
which I don't care.
This,
I personally don't care. People apologize like we didn't really talk about the topic. No, that's fine.
This
like,
is the
I think
best
it
kind
all
of podcast.
leads. I think it all leads back to it, honestly, because it's starting off with, depression and tragedy, like not allowing you to, because I think, and maybe I'm being more biased than I should, but I think writing, you need to have your mind extremely clear to write.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as a director, you have 1,000 things going in. So if your head's specifically clear, that may not be good, in my opinion, because you have to worry about time. You have to worry about continuity. You have to worry about what the shot looks like. Oh, by the way, you have actors you have to direct. You have, you have to worry about everything, in my opinion.
I think you have to be focused, but also then prepared.
Yes, exactly.
So,
you have to be.
A writer needs to be clearer.
Yeah,
in a different way.
Actor, like you just said, focused and prepared, right?
Yeah.
But you also, an actor can. So, I acted in something in October that my friend wrote, that I produced, and another friend of mine directed, and I acted in it, and it was a 7 to 8 page script, and I could tell like I just wasn't into it, it was the second most intense thing I think I've ever acted in my opinion. So I used a lot of that, just like anger I had of what I was going through to use it, which was, so that's what I'm saying. Like actors can kind of use, some people tell you not to, I personally think, it's like I said, it's all
there's
subjective.
a fine line for method acting.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I wasn't method at all. And a lot of these episodes I've talked about method. Whether do you believe in method acting or not really? Or
it's interesting because it's the de rigueur topic, because people are upset that I forget who it is, Daniel Day-Lewis or Jared Leto mainly, I guess, recently, is so method. I think it's fine. Yeah. It's just as long as you're not. I just don't
like Jared Leto. That's my
thing. I don't.
But Daniel Day-Lewis is,
But Daniel Day-Lewis didn't send a dead rat to anybody.
That's what I'm saying.
So
the worst thing Daniel Day-Lewis has done is like show up at Cracker Barrel as Abraham Lincoln.
Right. He used his voice.
Made for funny memes. Yeah.
Your mind is in character. You're not being an asshole.
Yeah. I used a lot of, I think a lot of people use certain situations, or in my opinion, this is coming from me, and I'm not a trained actor. I love it. I absolutely love it. I've done a few classes, but I'm speaking from me. It's like, okay, depending on the situation, like I just kind of go based on if it's a comedy, what I find funny, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like what I'm saying. It could be like my actions, my facial expressions, when I'm more serious. And this was like just, the character had to build up anger, and I was like, man, I have a lot going on, so like, why don't you just like build it up, and it worked. But for a writer, you're facing a blank page,
right,
with a fucking blinker with the blinking the cursor in your face, right, and you're like,
yeah. And my thing is, I'm good at story but not dialogue, I've discovered over the years. So then when you finally sit down to write it, you have to write dialogue, and it always comes out so badly.
You don't think you're not good? You don't think you're good at dialogue?
I think I'm really.
You have
good
really good vocabulary. You have you speak
but then I get
very
stuck
well.
on it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you speak very well. Like I remember, like not I don't remember certain situations, but like you were hosting that event, and like you were very like entertaining, and like the things you said were like funny to me, because you were saying that, then that made like Jess Vasquez laugh, and she has one of the most contagious laughs ever.
I think that helped it.
That too, yeah, I'm sure. But like you were very entertaining, so it's like it's funny because I feel like someone, if you can entertain, host, podcast, anything of that nature, then I feel like dialogue comes so natural.
Well, I know that at least in that situation, when we were with Jess at that one event, I knew what would get her to laugh. So I think I know how to make dialogue in the moment. I'm not great at improv for myself, but I know what will get someone else to do something.
But even like when we went out to eat afterwards, you were like, we were all sitting around the table. You were just like, right. You were like the life of the party per se. Like you, there was no, because that moment I didn't know anyone there. It was me. I met everyone there for the first time.
Okay.
So like I was having lunch with you and your best friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I was the outsider, so it was kind of like, okay, how do you not be awkward around, obviously I didn't know all of you were like that close until, I started getting to know you guys. I'm like, oh wow, you guys known each other since like middle school or high school,
18
So,
years
yeah,
now, yeah.
Yeah. So there's that deep history there, So, but you got, it was really interesting. Like you guys made everyone feel comfortable, but going back to it, it just seemed like you had what you were saying. It didn't feel forced.
Right.
You're just a natural at talking.
And I think that's what happens to me when I sit down at a computer. It feels like I'm forcing everything. And
really,
I've read a lot about when you try to make characterizations, you'll always find a character that is like you. Like if you look at Aaron Sorkin's work, everyone has the same dialogue.
Yeah.
And you can say Tom Cruise is the same person as Bradley Whitford in The West Wing,
yes.
or something like that. And so I can always find the character that I am, but then I try to pick someone else. Like if I were to imagine that situation where we were at that event, maybe I could put Jess in one of the characters. I could put you in one of the characters, and that would make it better because then I know who you are. Oh yeah, no, I think that's a good tip at least, but I always forget it when I go to sit down to write. So
I was working on that this past weekend. I was I was working with your boy Jeff, Sarah, my buddy Steve, and there was a line, and Steve wrote the script, and I was directing, and there was a line in the script that I was like, how it was delivered was exactly like Steve's wife. Like, the ending of it was like, come on, babe, let's go and get Chick-fil-A, and Sarah's character just like looks down and is like, well, I want Chick-fil-A. That's how Steve's wife would say that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then there's certain things where he was doing, him and I are very heavily influenced by Seinfeld, Curb,
Oh, that makes sense.
There were certain things where it was like he was doing motions of like, like how Jerry would do it when things happen. Like, so you see a lot of the influences around you that you love, whether, or just the people, I go based off of like, people I know, people I come across.
Sure.
Or maybe this is not the right way to do it. If I'm writing, because I try to write whatever I write, I try to be like, have the goal in mind of I want to film it. So then who do I want in there to act in it?
Yeah.
Then I think that makes it a little bit easier, right? So if I know, like, for this specific project I'm talking about that we filmed last week, and like, it's called When a Blind Man Cries. So I knew Sarah was the first person we casted. So I was like, from working with her, seeing her, like, how she delivers certain things, like this line of dialogue will work out perfect, So yeah, I think just kind of knowing it, but I think you're right too. Like if you're gonna write a scene similar to like a lunch scene with people, you can definitely be like, this is Jeff's voice without it being Jeff, or this is my voice without it being like completely Tristan, you know?
And yet, one of the things that happened during the pandemic was I got all this free time to be creative. There was a project that, I hate to say that the first month or so was the best time I've had in years because I finally got to do the things that I've been putting off for a decade.
Dude, I wrote four shorts in the month because, this is going to take 2-3 weeks and then we'll be back at it. Everyone, I think that was the most when anyone was like very like inspired or like enjoyed the most. And then they were like, it's been 18 months. What is going on?
Right. I also had to go back to work once in a while, so that delays sometimes. So then when your job is sporadic, it throws off your rhythm. So that's one thing with writing.
And that goes into working specific certain jobs like retail or something.
I was going to say about the projects during the pandemic, I started writing a feature film that is based on that friend's death. And grieving over it. So I'd been wanting to do this for years, and my girlfriend suggested I pick one of the ideas I have and go with it. So that's the one I chose. But when I finally started sitting down to write it and have a dialogue scene with, say, the 4 best friends, one of which who passes away, I struggled to come up with how all of us would talk. Even though I've known them for, say, 18 years, how do you really get across how they were without them all sounding like you?
Yeah.
That's a struggle.
Have you ever done any mental exercises to get over writer's block?
That's An interesting question. I have attempted to have a journal that I wake up and write something down right away.
How's
try
it
to get a
work?
paragraph. It worked for like a week. So, but that was during the pandemic as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it got me into the mode of knowing when I should be writing. So it got me to write, but then I would do it at the time I wanted to. So it did work in a way.
Yeah.
But then when, like I said, you get a sporadic schedule, it threw me off again. So that's the trouble I always find. If you make yourself too busy, you will find yourself never having time to do the thing you exactly want. If it's writing specifically,
it's all about planning it all out. Essentially, I guess, because if I think dedicating an hour or two a day to writing really will help you out, right? Like, and I know it sounds easier than it is, but I mean, if you wake up at 7 instead of 8 or 6 instead of 7 and you write for an hour,
right?
At least you're putting stuff in. People say they like writing early in the morning because that's when their brain is the freshest, which I guess makes sense. It's not
mine.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm, I've been very like getting tired like quicker during the day and like going to bed earlier for me. Like and bed for early for me is like 10 p.m. I would always go to bed 12 or 1 o'clock.
Me too.
Yeah. So it's like, going to bed early, but like I still wake up and it's like, I feel like I wake up and it's go, 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 go. It's never like I still have any time to breathe. I have you felt that way? Like, did you feel that way when your mom was going through all that, or even when she passed? Like, did you feel like it was just go, go, go? Like, or like, do you feel like right now, like, do you have any time to kind of just like have Tristan time or breathe or anything like that?
Well, I think I've been the way I am for at least a decade, and I don't think this has to do with my friend passing away, but I ended up overwhelming myself with different projects.
I'm the same way.
I had wanted to go through all the stuff I had from school, and it just kept piling up.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to do it with my mother, and then we never got around to it, obviously. So I'm finally doing that now. So I've been busying myself with that. And my girlfriend said, do something that you want to make the priority for. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but try to make the priority that you will get one thing done at a time, I suppose.
Do you have a list of things you want to get done? Or
there's a lot of things. And like I said, when the pandemic started, I finally got some things done. There was a project I wanted to edit that was when the first season of Homeland came out. There was a song that came out by the band Matt and Kim.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah. What song?
What is the real name of the song?
Is it Daylight?
I Said.
Okay.
It's not a single. It's on that same album as Daylight. But I think it might be the next one, the one that came out in 2010.
Okay.
And I forget the name of that album, but it's the one with Blue on it.
Yeah. I think. Trying to sing. I said. Yeah.
It's a simple song. But in Homeland, there's the character Isa, who Damian Lewis. I don't know if you ever saw the show.
No, I haven't. So I know it's Damian Lewis and Claire Danes.
Right. So Damian Lewis comes home from being a prisoner of war in the Middle East, and you find out that he is actually a double agent for that country.
Didn't know that.
You find it out right away. Okay. So I'm not really spoiling anything. It's in the pilot.
Nice. Okay.
So it goes on, and there's the anticipation of him acting out for the country he's being a double agent for. And you eventually find out that he connected with a person named Isa over there.
All right.
And so I came up with this idea of a lot of the lyrics in that song reminded me of that season. So I wanted to just match it. That's all I wanted to do, but I never had the time. Or I didn't have a computer that was strong enough to hold Final Cut.
Yeah.
Or then I had a job, so I was working every day. So then I finally had all three of those things at once, a computer that could do it, the time, and the energy to do it. So I finally managed to get that done. But that was the thing I wanted to do.
Did you post
10
it
years
anywhere?
ago? It's on YouTube.
Nice.
So I'll show you later.
Yeah.
And if you want to link to it, I don't care if anyone else sees it. I just did it for myself, really.
Nice.
But that's the thing. I started out as an editor, so that was an idea I wanted to have. out of school, I thought I would edit, but
Me
then
too.
the several things happened that I think contribute to this writer's block, and that's I'll go through those in order. Right out of school, I wanted to be an editor, and the financial crisis happened in 2008. So then no one was hiring, or if they were hiring, they were giving you an internship, or really lowballing you. So I got an internship, but it didn't go anywhere because I didn't live in New York. I think I did fine, but the company that hired me hired someone else, and they lived down the street. Yeah. So I always figured that's Jersey, what it was.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it was something else. I think I did a fine job, but not the best job. And there were other things that could happen that could mean why you don't keep a job. And so then I wasn't finding any work, so I started working at a Best Buy. And as we were talking before, you worked in retail.
Yeah.
This job, you never know your schedule. So I can never get any writing done because I never knew if I would write at night or in the morning.
Exactly. And it's not like you have a set schedule for the rest of your job. It's like, okay, this week you could be working a bunch of 4 to 9, 3 to 10, 12 to 8, and then next week.
And then it's the holiday season. Yeah. And then you're just doing 12 hours of retail rather than film. That's also when my friend passed away. So then
during the holidays?
During the day that I was supposed to go in for my first day at Best Buy. He passed away the day before, and we all found out that day. So
your first day at Best Buy, you were
I was a zombie.
Yeah.
So I think I was a zombie for a while because of that, and then you just go through the motions of doing retail. So by the time
his family in Jersey?
Yeah. They're still
keep in touch
still
with
around.
them? Or?
Yeah. We still see his sister, and we would see his mother for a long time. So, especially on his birthday or his death day.
When's his birthday?
It is February 10th. So, it also, I think, once I got out of the fog, I found myself not being able to write because of that. More than anything else. You just didn't have the time. And then I started getting film work because I want to go into this when we talk about 9 to 5, but you have all this pressure that people put on you. You had a subject that would be pressure of making it.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into all this too, because I would get from every corner, are you looking for a job? It's like, I have Best Buy and I want to write. But that isn't going to look like I have a job if I'm writing.
we can definitely talk more about that too. But I'll go into that. Yeah, when I had a certain job and my mom was like, "This ain't cutting it out," but it's like, "But I'm doing this," you know. But I was just going through the motions at that age, you know. So
I had to eventually not convince my parents, but show them that it was working. Because I was living with my parents still. I lived with them until 2016. And so that's 8 years after college.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful to them for allowing me that, because that allowed me to pay off my student loans, which is rare. But that is what happened. It was either have an apartment or pay off my loans, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful for them supporting me in that way. But then if there was a lean time after Best Buy where I didn't get any film work, it looked like I wasn't doing anything, because then I'd be depressed that I didn't have a job, and I would think I have to be looking for a job, whether it's day-long catering job that I'm filling in for someone or a month-long film. So then in that meantime, I'd get up in the morning, and I'd get up late because I was depressed, or I, for several years, was drinking all the time. And not heavily. It was, I'd go out at night with my friends and then be hungover in the morning.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much a problem, except that it probably took away time from writing.
And how old were you?
This was from...
Was in your 20s?
Yeah, I'd say from like 23 through 28. Maybe a little longer, but it wasn't like I was drinking every night. It was maybe 2 to 3 times a week, depending on the week, maybe once a week.
From 18 to 22, I worked, you know, I worked my 8-hour shift in retail, and then would just get blasted. And then, you know, like I started school late in life. I started at 22, went till I was 26. Yeah, I was enjoying all that because there was zero responsibility. I was just
Yeah,
getting
you're a
fucked
freshman
up.
where you can drink.
Yeah, you know, I was just getting fucked
Legally.
up. Yeah, so yeah, I get that. I get the, you know, you're living your 20s and all the time you wasted, you could have been writing, you know, but at the same time, you know, to play devil's advocate here, I feel like you got to live a little so you know what the fuck to write about.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I think that led me to want to see my friends all the time, having Max pass away.
Yeah.
I chose to experience my friends' 20s.
Rather than sit at home and write.
Right. Or go through that stuff that I wanted to
Yeah.
go through. It piled up because I wanted to see my friends.
Yeah.
And so those are the three things that happened in order. And then there was a relationship that wasn't exactly great for me that lasted a couple of years that distracted me from a lot of things.
Man, dude, we are like the same person.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, honestly, certain things, there was, you know, I don't know about your other relationships or anything, but, you know, before I met my wife, everyone thought, like, so when are you going to get a real job? Like, when is this hobby going to stop?
Right.
And I'm like, this isn't a hobby. Like, I'm trying to make this a thing. And some of them were like, well, I really, you know, some girls, I believe in you, you know, it's nice to see you. It's inspiring, but they were also like, okay, but how are you going to get money? And it's like, I feel like that's all kind of like relationships are based on is like, can you financially take care of yourself? You can, cool. Let's make this a thing. And it shouldn't necessarily be that way, you know, like not every artist I know is like a broke joke. Like they're just trying to make it like, in whatever way they feel like is making it, they're trying to just function and do something and follow a dream. Most people are doing a job that their parents wanted them to do. So
I'm also very lucky that my parents were always fine with what I wanted to do. Probably because they met in a theater. Yeah, they were fine if I wanted to make film.
Exactly.
They just wanted me to be happy.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky for that. But obviously they didn't like when I didn't have a month where I worked.
Yeah.
Because they would want me to be able to
but
support
you were in
myself.
your 20s though.
Yeah.
Or like
yeah. Once I got the apartment we're recording in right now, I never had to worry about financial responsibilities. I've had lean months in this apartment, but I always had enough of a savings that I could handle it.
Yeah.
So it was the 8 years that led up to that where I could save up enough money that I could do that.
Exactly.
So I, by living with them, also learned how to be financially responsible because then seeing when I was lean, I had them to back me up. So then when I was lean here, I knew what to do to not fall apart.
Exactly.
But not everyone gets that lucky.
No.
A lot of people get thrown into the fire because of family situations or a number of reasons. And so I am extremely lucky that my life has gone the way it has. But even then, I don't know if the depression I have is stemming from Max dying or has always been there. And I was diagnosed with anxiety in 2016 or 17. And trying to deal with that, I don't know if I always had it. So
yeah, I mean, I definitely had it when I was a kid. I went to go see a therapist for it. Like I was on meds, then they weaned me off because my doctor was like, you know, he'll just something once puberty hits, it'll balance out. But yeah, I had really bad anxiety when I was younger with a lot of stuff, and you know, I'm trying to figure that out now in therapy. And yeah, I don't know. I it's weird saying it out loud because every time I've always said this to people, they've always been like, oh, well, you know, it is what it is, or like, you don't have to worry about it. But like, I don't know. I'm my mom says I was a very like loving, fun kid. But yeah, I just can't help but think of the worst in every situation. So I know that's not necessarily depression, but it's very pessimistic, you know?
Well, you also might just have a lot of empathy. And I don't know if this is the same for you as it is for me, where you see the ills of the world, like the tragedy that's happening out in other countries and even in your own, and you get depressed about that. And so that doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's that word empathy has been floating around a lot in my life in general, of like people saying they are, or, you know, kind of, you know, I don't know what an empath really is. I guess it's you feel others' pain, you know. I don't think
or you can relate. That's what I always thought.
Yeah, like I don't. I like most of the people I come across. I enjoy them and I enjoy their company. So seeing them hurt, like you telling me about your life story, it's like, fuck, man, just want to give you a hug and be like, it's all okay. You know, that's how I feel I am, right? So yeah, I guess that's the empathy of that. But I also feel like, I don't know if you feel this way or have gone through this way. I'm not even as a man, or maybe because we are men and we're not supposed to do that. I feel like a lot of people are very fucking robotic. Like, I don't feel necessarily comfortable telling anyone how I feel. This is different. Like I said, this is a podcast. We're not in front of an audience. It's just you and I, your house. Like, we're comfortable. So I feel very comfortable saying certain things. And I'm saying it for the podcast because I went into it on my own saying I'm going to be as authentic and real and open as possible, because if I'm not, then people, I don't want to be fake on a podcast that's talking about, like how you're supposed to feel.
Sure.
I think I would love to hear your input on it. I think a lot of guys, or just not even guys, just people in general, like I've seen a lot of, and women too, just very stone cold and like.
Well, you hold your feelings in.
A lot of people hold their feelings, and I don't.
Especially the British.
Yeah.
It's.
But I don't know if it's
You gotta bury it down.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like, and I don't know if it's because since I've been in therapy for 2 years, like that's my mindset's changing. But I'm very. I don't know, man. Like I almost want to be like, you're not cool for like putting up a wall. Like you're just not cool. Like you think you're being cool, but you're not. And I don't feel the need to call people out in it. But sometimes I wish I had the balls to do that, because it's like, it's okay to let your guard down. Like, I'm being vulnerable, and then when I'm vulnerable and then they don't reciprocate, I feel like I'm an asshole for doing that. You know, I don't know. What are your thoughts on all that? I know.
Well, it's interesting because when you came up with this idea for this podcast, it reminded me of, I have a friend that's up in Brooklyn named Mike Heiliger. He has his own podcast he's been doing called Detoxicity, which talks only to men about how they've noticed toxic masculinity exist in their lives, and it's not exactly the same for everyone. But like what you're saying is, you feel it's weird to share feelings, but why not? Is basically what it comes down to.
Because it's like I feel weird being like with my good friends, I'll tell guy, girl, whatever, I'll say I love you, and I don't get it back half the time.
Right.
And it's
I say I love you to a lot of my guy friends now, and it's just natural.
I'm talking guy and girlfriends.
Sure.
But so I don't want the girls to be like, oh my God, he's in love with me. It's like,
oh no, yeah, I have a
wife, I have a kid on the way. Like, you're the last thing on my mind. Like I'm sorry, and I'm not saying all my girlfriends, girls who are friends say, I am, and like I said, I know I keep going back to it, and I do apologize. I think it's because I have seen what my stepdad has lost. He can't talk. Can't talk. So he can't speak. He can't communicate. He can't do half the shit he wanted to do. And it happened, dude, like fucking that.
Right.
Like, so I'm trying to go through life giving people their props, their flowers, or anything like that.
Right.
Like, I appreciate you as a friend. Thank you. Like, hugging my guy friend, saying I love you. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. And it's not, I don't think it makes me weak or anything like that, but it just, I don't feel necessarily comfortable being that open with everyone. I'm not going to tell every stranger or every Tom, Dick, and Harry that I love them.
Sure.
But if I work with someone who makes at my job, I have people who make my job a lot easier. Like, they really do. And I'm like, dude, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I've done that, and they're like, what are you doing? It's work. It's like, come on, man. Like, you don't have to
a little
be
kindness
this.
you don't realize until
I'm just
later.
trying to be nice. Like, I'm really just trying to be nice, and so I don't know. I just
I'm a bit of a grump at my regular job, the one I have now.
I try not to be, because I'm there so
great.
much. No, and I was at my job. I was working with someone who just made my life a little bit tough, like just a little bit tougher. He left, and work has been so fucking good since then. And I hate saying it, saying that out loud and putting that out there, but it's true. And it's like, man, like, because he was just so negative about everything. So like when that negativity 8 hours a day left, like, man, like it's all this room for like, fuck yeah, like let's make some cool shit, you know? Like I'm just filming cigars. Like I'm not reinventing the wheel. So, and I'm writing about it. I'm not reinventing shit. So I get like maybe but I get where like being a grump at a job is because of like maybe certain circumstances and all that. You know, people not wanting to be where they're at. I get that.
Yeah, that's exactly all it is.
That's what it is. But as long as you leave that job and you're not bringing that grumposaurus attitude, like
that's the thing.
Here or anywhere else.
Did I mention this on the podcast or before? The 2 jobs I have are at a lighting rental company and then filming sports. Did I mention that here?
I think it was off air.
I think it was off air.
Yeah.
So I have 2 jobs concurrently, and one of them is filming sports, which obviously sounds fun.
Yeah.
But everyone's great there. Everyone gets along.
Yeah.
You have less hours. And I think that's the biggest key is that, especially since the pandemic started, a lot of people that work in office settings find that what they didn't like was the commute because they're not actually working 8-hour jobs. They're working 10-hour jobs.
Yeah.
So this job at Princeton University is where I film most of the sports now. They're like 5-6 hours and you're filming sports. Yeah. So it's something that's enjoyable to begin with.
And you're seeing that team camaraderie.
Right.
Yeah.
But then this other job, which isn't hard in any way,
it just isn't fulfilling.
In an old factory. It's grip work. I never wanted to do grip work. Yeah. So everyone that works there is anticipating becoming a gaffer.
Yes.
Except for me. And so I don't want to be there. I've now driven an hour to be a place I don't want to be.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the people there, but then I end up grumpy whether I want to or not.
It's the circumstances.
And it rubs off on them. And I'm sure when I leave, they'll act the same way you do about this other guy. It's just because it's been 4 years of me acting like that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely negative when I go there. And it sucks because I don't want to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee that if you ask someone from Princeton, they would be shocked that I'm negative. And anyone from
it's 2 different things, yeah.
The other company would be shocked that I'm happy everywhere else. So
Tristan shoots sports and he likes it. Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, I try really like today I walked in my job and then my employee, because I'm a boss of the video department, my employee, he just did something to where I was like, I just didn't have the patience for it. And it was 9 a.m. I was exhausted coming off a shoot. And I was just like, I don't have time for this today already. And I just set it off like that. I wasn't angry, but it was like, it's a deeper thing than that. Like I kind of gave him a warning of like, hey, maybe you shouldn't like push buttons. And I walk in and I hear like him pushing buttons. I'm like, on a Monday fucking morning, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, man, like I just went to bat for you and this and that. Like, so like I could see there's some times where I just am kind of like at my wit's end and I'm just maybe overtired with it. But I'm only going in 3 days a week. And when I'm there, I'm like with like coworkers that just make it fun being there. We're shit talking, we're talking movies, sports. Like I said, like this job is the best job I've had. But like if I was in retail, I was the worst retail employee possible. You know, it's all about customer engagement, and you talk to them and they don't even answer you or they shut you down. Then you're like, all right, well, like you're in my mind, I'm like, well, fuck you. Like I just said, hey, how are you? You know, and you know, there's, you know, if you say it a few times, and they're like, I'm good. Like, what's up? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, having to deal with people like that, you know. So I think all depends on the job you're at too.
Yeah.
You know, you're by yourself filming sports, you know, it's you filming, right? Just you?
No, by now when I started it was basically you'd have one person on the baseball shoot, or you might have 2 on basketball, but by now it's 4 cameras at minimum.
Wow.
Because they have their your game cam, you have the high and tight, which gets the heroes, and then say just for basketball you have the under the basket cams, or baseball you have first and third base, that sort of thing. So there's you don't know who's going to be on any week, but then you might see each other 2 weeks later and it's how you been.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of thing. So it's always fun seeing all of them.
Nice.
But that's an interesting thing. So by now I've done all sorts of different things in film. So I went from editing, not getting it. Then I accidentally I ended up in a production. I worked in a production office on the first film I worked on, and they sent me to a second film. Someone recommended me, and I show up and I'm placed with the props master. And I worked for her for the whole film. It was like a month. And then on the last week, I go into the production office and they're like, "Oh, Tristan, we thought you never showed up." And I'm like, "I've been across the hall making your props. What are you talking about?" So I accidentally became a props person.
That's funny.
And so then it did eight years of art department. And so then I ended up with these sports. When that sort of dried up, I just didn't find anything for a little while. Someone offhandedly said, "Do you know basketball?" And I said, "I've never really watched it. I know what it is." And they're like, "You just follow the ball. Just, can you make it down here in a half an hour?"
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went and filmed basketball at Princeton, and
that's pretty dope.
That was 6 years ago. So,
that's pretty dope.
And then I ended up working in this grip house. So I've technically worked in every department. I've gaffed for them because of them needing people to go on set. So I've done everything in this time, but in all that, I never have time to do the thing I really wanted to do, which was write.
Yeah.
So it ends up being that I got in a pattern where when I didn't have work, I would be depressed because I wasn't finding work, or I was thinking I need to find work. So I'd wake up, I'd not write because I'd think I got to look for something. Suddenly lunch would come. So I would say I'd be hungover till then.
Yeah.
As well. So it was either being hungover or depressed. This leads into being anxious. And then the afternoon would come and I'd be done. I want to have fun.
Yeah.
Let me watch a movie because I have off today.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting nothing done. And so you never find the time to be quiet. And finally, the time I'd have to be able to write would be late at night when I thought I would have the most energy or inspiration to write. And then it would be the time we'd want to go drinking.
Yeah.
Or someone will want to go do something and I never wanted to turn them down. So there's another aspect of anxiety that I think my mind always worries about. It's remembering what you're talking about. I've noticed a lot in conversations about not exactly couples counseling, but getting to understand each other as a couple, my girlfriend and I, when we say get into an argument, trying to remember what you were talking about, it always gets me frustrated and makes her angry. Yeah. And that's a simplification of what happens. But I get frustrated very easily when I don't remember what I was trying to say.
Really? So, like even like in front of people, if you forget, like do you get physically angry, or are you like kind of?
No, not in public.
When you're by yourself, you're like, what the fuck was I like? Is that what it like? Is it something like that, or?
Imagine you're in a circle of friends, say after a movie, and you're all trying to talk about the movie, and you go off on different tangents and stuff. I might get frustrated that I didn't get my thought in, and I want to go back to that.
Gotcha.
And if it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone.
But
okay. All right.
Say I'm trying to have a very deep conversation, I get frustrated then. And so that's where the arguments might happen. And I don't want to say that we argue all the time, but it is something that I've noticed how to not get frustrated. She has helped me figure out ways to get over that frustration. And I think this is why I was pointing out, I wrote notes down on subjects to remember about writer's block, and the other subject we were talking about a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, yeah. So
these go hand in hand.
Yeah, because so do you think, going on to 9-to-5, do you think you can be creative also while be like working 9-to-5? And you make a good point I bring up all the time. It's not just 9-to-5. It's like 8-to-6. 7:45 to 6:15.
Right.
Do you think you can be creative? Not like in general. We'll speak from like your perspective, but like in general, do you think it's easier or tougher to be creative after a long day, especially if your job is also in the creative field.
So that's an interesting point you make, and I wanted to mention a funny anecdote from my job.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of calling my boss out on this, but he, early in working for this grip house, I was working at Princeton still, or other places. What started out at Princeton also went to other schools and filming sports at all up and down the East Coast. Yeah.
So you would travel with
initially
the teams.
There was a guy that was hired by Princeton that would go up and down the East Coast to different schools. And then eventually he was let go by Princeton. But I said, I live a half an hour away. Can you still hire me when you hire a crew? And so that's how I stuck at Princeton. I don't go anywhere else anymore, but I used to go everywhere.
I'm telling you, I think you said like you were traveling with the team, and I was like, that's awesome.
It wasn't just Princeton going other places. It was like this guy had a truck, and a lot of people did this and still do. Like ESPN will have a truck that goes to UConn and film the basketball. And so they'll set it up and they'll hire a local crew to go do that. And so I was the local crew from New Jersey, but this guy would get himself hired out to University of Maine or Davidson University.
Wow.
And so I went to those two specific places with him. But that's a nightmare.
South Carolina or Maine.
So we would drive in his truck to get down there, and that was a nightmare. So I'm glad it isn't happening anymore, but...
you didn't like driving, like the travel, or...
Well, he would make it so tight that he would have something in South Carolina and then have something in DC the next day. And so you don't have time to set up. And
that's anxiety.
In that time, I learned about travel days where you get paid for that, which he was never doing. So,
fuck.
So that's a different
story. Where in Maine did you go?
University of Maine. Okay. So that's all the way up in... I forget what town that is.
Southern Maine, right?
It's
University
middle of Maine. Yeah, it's way up there.
Like near Acadia National
Park.
Yeah,
it's up above.
Because I have family, my grandparents, they live in Scarborough, Maine, which is about an hour into Maine.
That is south. My aunt just moved there, actually. Yeah. She's lived in Yarmouth.
Yes.
If you know that? She just moved down to Scarborough.
Yeah.
So my grandparents retired there. So.
Nice. Portland, Maine's beautiful. Mm-hmm. But it's 6 hours, dude.
I don't know if you know Cousins Island.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of that? That's where my grandparents retired to.
That's awesome. So. Well... Cousins Maine Lobster. I think that has to be from there, right?
I think so. There's no restaurants on the island. There is.
No, but
there is an island that has a restaurant on it just past Cousins Island.
So it might be, but you see it all here now, Cousins Maine Lobster. So maybe I don't know. It's the lobster from Cousins.
It's Orono, Maine.
Orono?
I would never have come up with that off the top of my head.
No, I don't.
It's in the middle of the state.
Never even heard of fucking Orono.
Yeah, it's up there.
And then Davidson is in Charleston. Or outside of Charleston.
I thought we were in North Carolina, but I was asleep. So it's where Steph Curry goes, and that's all that matters.
Yes, yeah. That's where he went. Yeah.
But then we were filming soccer. That's what always seemed to happen. We went to UConn and filmed soccer.
You weren't going to UConn and being like, let's meet Gino Auriemma.
Yeah, we went to Providence where they have a really good men's hockey team, and we filmed basketball. It's like, okay.
Okay. Yep.
We always do the wrong sport. But at Princeton now, I've done all the sports because now they have a crew. And what happened was in university sports, they kind of got rid of a guy like the one I was working for because ESPN Plus was formed. And ESPN gave all these universities a licensing agreement. Yeah. So then they all got money to make their own control rooms. And so everyone can just make their own productions now.
Yeah.
So the budgets are just better. And they can hire local crews, but we're very close to Rutgers. Rutgers just hires out their students. So I'm never going to get a way in.
Yeah.
Unless you know someone or it's just one time.
Yeah, I live right by Rutgers. Yeah. I'm like 10 minutes away.
So I'd love to go to Rutgers.
Oh, yeah, you're
almost
right there.
walk there.
Yeah. So yeah, do you think you can? No, I'm just saying, do you think it's because you said you had a story about your boss about
this
being
is a
creative
different boss.
Okay.
So to get back to that, when I was still working for Princeton towards the beginning of this grip house job, they would allow me to go work whenever I had a different job. They said I wasn't a full-time person at Double Down Lighting, which is this grip house. And I had a job at Princeton or somewhere else. I got hired for the day or something because I was still doing other random freelance work. And he said, "Are you committed to Double Down?" Because he was trying to figure out which of the several of us that were freelancers could be potential full-timers.
Could be used, yep.
And so I said, I would like to do this too. And he's like, but that's outside the industry. I'm like, you run a grip house. None of these people are on set, and I'm the one filming people. That's closer than you. Like, what are you talking about? And yet,
what was his reasoning for that, you think?
I think he just didn't know how to communicate to people. He's gotten a lot better.
Okay.
He realized how to manage a business, because what happened was he started out renting equipment out of his garage, and then he hired a guy who is now the equipment manager and basically runs all of us. They very quickly grew and formed a joint venture with a studio that's in Jersey City. And together, the studio had the space. This guy had the equipment. They blossomed even further 4 years ago. And now we have a crew of like 30.
Wow.
And it's been great. And so he's finally figured out how to communicate to people and not be short-sighted in that way. It's just a funny anecdote, you know. But the other half of that is I've mentioned this company to people that work in sports, and they're like, so they're like next to the industry. Because that's how people see grip houses. Like there's Barbizon that sells things like we do.
Yeah.
They're one of our vendors. They're technically in the industry, but a lot of people would say they're vendors of the industry.
Why is that though?
Because people look down on things that aren't exactly on set, I think. It's a weird dichotomy.
That is interesting, because I remember, you know, it's not really in the same vein, but for my internship in college, like a bunch of us got hired on this web series, and I was second AD.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know if you know anything about second AD, because I sure as fuck didn't at the time. Second ADs are never on set. They are in the office.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
So I did work under a second AD at the production office.
They are in the office. They are making phone calls. They are driving talent like to and from set on the golf carts. And, I remember at the time it was like 3 or 4 days. It was 3 days before production was going to end, and the entire crew, which was all the kids I went to school with, said that they were going to walk off because they were being mistreated.
Sure.
Right? So they come to me to talk to the first AD. I told the first AD, hey, I think his name was Richard, hey, you know, we have an unhappy crew. They want to talk to you. And they were not yelling at me, but they were giving me the business, right? They were, and I've noticed that there's a few things where if people are comfortable with you, they'll give you the business, versus, you know, when the person they want to talk to, they have a chance to, they don't, and that's kind of what happened. Like 20 of them, we sat outside, 20 of them, and Richard's like, oh, so Chris told me you guys want to talk to me. What's up? Crickets. And I kind of like, I was younger. I was very unprofessional. You know, I was like probably 25, right? 24, 25. And I was like, y'all like interrupted my dinner because they were eating. I was about to sit down and eat. And then they got me to, you know, pull me in and say, we're going to walk off set. This is like 20 people telling me 20 different things. I was like, when he gets back inside, I will get him and we'll go outside and talk.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to have my dinner, so I said to them, I was like, y'all fucking, like, I didn't say it like that, but I was like, y'all made me miss my dinner just to be quiet. Like, you're wasting my time. You're wasting Richard's time. It's the end of the day. We have to be back here at 7 a.m. If you guys have nothing to say, then we're going to fucking leave. But if you have stuff to say it. And people started saying stuff, and, you know, it kind of got, it seemed like people's feelings were just hurt rather than like legit things. And it's because we're all college kids and thought we were hot shit. And we worked kind of it was a shitty set, but we worked on a set with like trailers and, you know, like legit stuff, legit actors, honestly. Paul Rodriguez, I'd never heard of him beforehand. He was the main guy. And I mean, like, the guy Richard was like, I thought I was going to be in trouble because it's like I was the middleman and all that. And Richard's like, you handled yourself really well. And I was like, that is the last time I will be an AD of any kind.
And you find what you fit.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's funny that you say this. And, like I said, man, you and I are very, very similar. Like you said, you fell in love with editing at first. So did I. And then I transitioned to writing because I think it's a storytelling aspect, Yeah,
you get to put things in order.
Exactly.
You get the control,
You're in control. You get to feed your, I don't know if you have OCD at all. You get to kind of.
Probably do.
Yeah, you got to feed that. So you've mentioned, and I don't mean to keep going off topic with stuff. I apologize. But you've mentioned anxiety a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Are you like, were you diagnosed with it?
So I was diagnosed with it. I thought I requested, I went to a therapist and I requested.
Are you in therapy now?
Not right now. Oh. And that's mostly because of the pandemic. My therapist moved to Tennessee in 2019.
Okay.
Maybe 2018. I forget exactly when she left, but.
Were you an advocate for?
I would be, yeah. She was great. She happened to move, and what we were talking about over the time was coming to a natural conclusion anyway. And I think it's good to move around so the therapy doesn't become stale.
Move around in the sense of?
To have different therapists, especially if you have one for, say, I was with her for like 3 years. And I think what we were talking about at the beginning came to a natural conclusion in that I had found a peace of mind about it.
Yeah.
So this comes after that sort of pseudo bad relationship that I was in. And I was in a sort of dark place in that I wasn't finding work, that art department stuff was drying up, and I was upset about her and other things. And I was never getting over Max. And so I went to the therapist to talk about death. And I don't like working, but really what it is like we mentioned before, I don't like working at a place I don't want to work.
Yeah.
And I think this came down to the pressure of people saying you need to be finding a job. And so...
And was that family, friends?
It really wasn't my parents, other than, what are you doing, not doing anything today?
Was it
and
friends?
They weren't even saying it. I think I was harder on it than they were.
Was it like your uncles or something, or aunts, or...
People would mention it offhandedly when I hadn't seen them for a few months. It's like, what are you doing now? And what are you doing would set me off because I didn't want to talk about it. Because
when they said that,
like
what
would
happen?
Failure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, when they would say, what are you doing now? How would you react?
I would feel like I was sort of a failure because nothing had happened maybe in a month. And so I found myself needing to come up with something to tell people about. And so, say that job that I mentioned earlier with catering, I'd be able to use that as a story so that people would be interested in what I was doing. But it was one day in a month that I'd worked, maybe, as an example of what would happen.
I mean, that's very, dude, man, it's very detrimental to your, but in general, like, not working a lot. Like, so you said you hate work, like you not hate working, but like
it's very simple to say hate working. It was that I didn't want to work for the sake of working, and what I've come to realize is that I didn't like the standard societal parameters of working, where you have an hour-long commute, so that, like we've talked about, it's actually 10 hours you're working.
Yeah,
I think I could get my job done at this grip house in 4 hours if I wanted to. If I rush through it at an even pace and they're not down your neck about something, I could get it done very quickly.
Yeah.
But say last week we were very busy and we needed all 8 hours. So that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that's coming, then you're fine with it. But say today, I literally had an hour of work. I just stretched it out to 8 hours. But that's not great because then it looks like I'm not working, or other people are working harder because they might have had a little more work than you.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of thing I don't like. And I didn't know how to articulate it 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Do you, when you find yourself, I guess, I think you may have just answered this right here, but like when you find yourself like, I don't know, like when I moved back home, I didn't have a job, so I felt very like worthless. Mm-hmm. You know, like, if I'm not working, I feel worthless. And it's not, anyone saying that. I just think it's the pressure people put on you. I mean, it's the pressure you put on yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think it's society. Just because we used to be in a society that had a 6-day work week, and before unions created weekends for us, there was an idea that you had to be working all the time or you were a failure.
But then now you see some countries are only doing 4-day work weeks.
Right.
And
I think that would benefit us in general, because then it would set a precedent.
But would you still do 40 hours? Would you still do 10-hour days?
But that's because the company requires the 40 hours. My roommate worked at a supermarket that is defunct now, Acme, and what happened was when they were raising the minimum wage, they cut everyone's hours to 30 because they couldn't afford the 40 hours.
Yeah.
So then the company went under because the government insisted they make it a minimum wage. So this is a whole different ballgame in what is wrong with society in general. It's hard to pinpoint what would make it better, but a 4-day work week would help. It depends on the company, I think, because say for film industry, they shut down around January because everyone goes home for the holidays, whatever holiday it is. And then pilot season doesn't pick up until February, whether you're in New York or LA. So there's a month where there's a bit of a lull. My first film happened to start in January, but it was an independent film that was non-union. So all the non-union people had work in January 2009. But some don't. People get their vacation then. It's, say, in the film industry, it would be easy to say a distinct time to take off. I know people that work for 6 months straight and they're working 6-day work weeks, and then they take a month off because they've saved up all their money.
Yeah, and their time.
So people make it work, but you shouldn't have to. I found that when I was on set, I was working, again, with the commute. It was actually 14-hour days because I'd be a PA on something, and I'd have to go pick up the truck or the passenger van to go pick up the crew. And so then I'd be driving home after finally dropping the passenger van off at Edge Rental up in nearly the Bronx, and you're driving back to New Jersey, I would fall asleep on my way home. So that's a thing that I wanted to bring up. Like, what's better, a 9-to-5 that's at least in the industry in a way, whether it's adjacent or not, you can still feel like you're part of it.
Yeah. Well, what are some positives and negatives of working a 9-to-5 as an artist, in your opinion?
Well, it depends on what the 9-to-5 is, of course, but
if the 9-to-5 is not art,
right?
Like, let's say the 9-to-5 is
an office job,
accounting, anything like that.
I have a friend who actually, unfortunately, just passed away as well. So, again, I've been surrounded by death, but
I'm not trying. I'm not laughing. I'm just, Was it during COVID?
It was December
because of COVID, or
no? He had a heart condition, I believe, and it just happened subtly. So,
was it someone that like all of you knew, like Jeff? And okay,
yeah, friend of Jeff and ours. He was a writer, and he had an office job.
What was his name? I'm sorry,
Brian Millard. Do you remember that name coming up at all in December?
Yes. I saw a bunch of people post about him. I think Jeff posted about him, and I saw a lot of people post about him, and it was like, that's really sad. Yeah,
and that's the thing we were talking about. People have just sort of moved on because what else do you do?
Well, it's kind of like that whole thing with the Brooklyn shooting in the subway. I feel like people are kind of, like, some people are like, wait, what happened? Like, how do you not know it was a mass shooting in the biggest city in the world? And how do we not know?
And
like,
people didn't die, so people moved on even quicker.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, people were injured, so, but yeah, like you said, people didn't die, so it's like, oh, okay, so time to press on. But is that a New York thing? Is that just how the world is? Because everything is so, like, everything on the TV is just, like, rapidly, like, going. You know, we just have so much going on to where we can't, like, sit and, like, mourn for a second.
It's hard to say with that because we have so much access to things in the moment these days that it's hard to quantify what our grief would be about something. And it makes me think of 9/11.
Yeah.
Like, I have second cousins that are out in South Dakota, but they don't have anyone that they know that died in 9/11 because it is a very New York thing.
Yeah.
And so it
their
is hard
impact on
to
that is a lot
understand
different than
how it
yours.
feels. Yeah. I don't know anyone that died, luckily. But I knew people that worked in the World Trade Center and survived.
Oh, so I know a handful of people who worked in the towers. Once it hit, they were able to evacuate. I know one woman, she walked from the World Trade Center to somewhere in Brooklyn, and then didn't get home till 2 days prior to that because you couldn't get in and out of the city. It was just
it's just insane.
Yeah, but sorry
the thing with that
veer
is
off. Yeah,
everyone always does when you bring up 9/11. You want to tell your 9/11 story and everything.
But do you think you can function as an artist in 9 to 5, depending on what your job is, or?
Well, that was what I was bringing up with Brian Millar.
Yeah.
He worked in an office in New Jersey, and he was like a numbers cruncher or something. But he could compartmentalize that, keep it at the office, and then he'd go home and write. Because he had an apartment that he would just go home to, write for an hour or two, and then watch a movie, write a little more, and then go to bed and do it again. And so he had the capacity to do that. I wonder if with anxiety, it holds me back. I need everything to be perfect. Yeah. And so for me, maybe I'm just not as, quote, perfect as Brian was at finding the way to do it. But I think it's doable. It just depends on if you can get yourself in the correct pattern.
What about if he was a numbers cruncher? Obviously, his day job wasn't artistic. So do you think once he's able to come home and be artistic, it was just flowing out versus all right, I used my creativity at 10 a.m. at my job until 1 o'clock, and then I had lunch, and then now I have to come home and be more creative. Do you think there's such a thing as being too creative to the point where you have nothing left?
Right. I don't think he was being creative in his actual work there. So I think, if I remember correctly, he was saying he would think about the script he was writing while doing the numbers crunching. And I do that at my job.
Yeah.
Like I said, I would drive and think about the story. I can do the work that I do at Double Down and think about what I'm writing. It's just making sure you don't have the distractions. My apartment is fine, but it's a split level house, and so I can hear the neighbors. So at 11:30 at night, they're always watching the nightly news. I can't write if their TV is in my ear. So the best thing for me would be to have headphones or to write up here where we're recording in the living room.
Yeah.
So you just have to find the best place to go. I've read a lot about people finding a nook to put themselves in. If you have a small apartment, you might have a corner where you can write. But if you make a space that can be adjustable even, that would be beneficial. And I think that's what Brian did. I think that's what people can do with a 9 to 5. It's you take your lunch break and you write a little. I read about Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder writing Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein, one on the set of the other. I forget which it is. Wow. But they would do that during the lunches of the other film.
That's nuts.
Because they were thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
So once you get in that mode, you're going to keep going.
Yeah, I feel like once you have a story that you're absolutely in love with, the flow is just endless. So
yeah.
The final two questions I have for you in regards to, I know we kind of combined these topics, but we were talking a lot about work and all that. Do you think you can be a full-time artist as well as a full-time, 9 to 5 employee and kind of be successful at both?
I think that goes into a lot of people that are on Etsy, that sort of thing. I think people that have an Etsy shop find themselves able to do that sort of thing.
What about you right now?
I think it's hard for me because I'm always at that other job. From Thanksgiving to St. Patrick's Day, worked almost every day. And the days I had off were Christmas itself. I had a short vacation where I went to New Orleans with my roommate. And that technically wasn't work, but it was days that I didn't have where I was writing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say that I really had any free time.
And when you went to New Orleans, were you actually be able to relax, or were you just kind of your anxiety was
I was a little tense, yeah. But it was fun because we were seeing things we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
So it was still a good vacation, but there's still that sense that we got to pack this in because we're only here for 4 days or whatever. I think that it's hard to be a full-time for both if your commute takes a lot out of you. And I think you can't just tell someone to find a job that's within their radius because not everything
My
is
job
there.
is an hour away.
Right.
With traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Same as me. So it's hard to find a way to be full-time for both, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think one's going to be lacking.
Yeah.
For sure. So it really depends on how you feel. Like, you know, if you're at your job and you're like, okay, well, it requires kind of like the bare minimum, I'm going to do it. You know, if I want to make a better effort, I will. But like, do I, at my day job, personally, for me, at my day job, sometimes I'm making phone calls or I'm doing stuff for my freelance work. And it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
I guess that's the blessing from working from home, as I spill the beans on that. But it's true. Like sometimes you're like, okay, I'm on Thursday, Friday, I'm done at 3. Well, you know what? I'm going to start editing on this other project. And if stuff happens, I'll take care of it. But it's like, it's so tough.
I think that is the benefit of, say, freelance creating. Because you could have a job that is creative too that you get to do from home. So I think this whole thing has benefited artists in a way because
it's benefited me for sure because I'm able to work on stuff when I have downtime.
Right.
And I'm not.
You can kind of make your own downtime.
Ever take an hour lunch break at home now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 30 minutes, maybe 35. Then the other 25, I can work on stuff, and then that'll be nice. But those 25 minutes go by quick. So it's like. Do you take it at the end of the day? Do you take it like during your lunch break? Like, what do you do? So, it's tough to balance both. I think one is always going to suffer.
Yeah.
What would you suggest? Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
What would you suggest or do differently as a 9-to-5 working artist?
From what I've already done before?
Yeah.
You mean?
Like if you had to look back and say, like, what would you do differently right now?
I don't regret anything I've done. I'll say that for sure. Because if you regret anything in life, it's going to haunt you in certain ways. Like, you can't get hung up on everything.
Every little thing you've done or haven't done. Yep.
Because I've learned something from everywhere. I remember in Best Buy, even, I remembered how to... I had a good GM there, and I learned delegation from him because I hate teaching people how to do something. But I saw what he did, and I knew how to do it from him. So I can take that from Best Buy. It's not like Best Buy was really the best job, but I can't say that I hated it. It's just technically retail. And the things about that job that I don't like aren't anyone's fault.
Yeah.
In there. It's just a societal issue. And so I'd say if I were to change anything, it would be to remember that I didn't realize this until about 5 years after college, that everyone was in the same boat right out of school. We weren't finding anything.
Out their life,
right. And so when you're in your 20s, you think that you're failing because you're not perfect right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing a 9-to-5, finding time management right off the bat is a good way to get yourself set for your 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I learned from my therapist, because I said I went to her because I didn't like working, she helped me figure out how to write in a more efficient manner. I had started a blog where I just talked about movies. I ended up starting a podcast with friends.
Nice.
And I became efficient because she and I talked out what I was doing to hold myself back. And so I think therapy is a good way to figure yourself out in that way. And maybe not for everybody, but in the specific ways that I found it, I mean. But my time management was, I think, my biggest issue, and I didn't even realize it. So if you can find a 9-to-5 that is literally a 9-to-5, that'll be helpful. If you can find a place that will allow you the freedom to be creative in your lunch breaks. That'll be helpful. But
yeah, but it's also like all the things
you
that
can't always get that.
No, you're right. But it's also, for me, it's just pushing through and like doing time management and doing, and figuring that out, because it's like on lunch break, for me, like when I go into work now, my lunch break, no one eats lunch together anymore, probably because COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's used to eating at their desk.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so for my lunch breaks, like maybe I go upstairs and I write, or I look up some acting tutorials or something like that. I think you have to be a mixture of being proactive for sure and not letting like the exhaustion like set in after work, or like at night, like, or procrastination. Like my thing is procrastinating. Oh, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
But like when you don't get to it, then you like, I don't know about you, I feel like I've failed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like get to it, but like try to find that balance of like getting to it like because you want to, not because you have to.
I also work really well in a time crunch. Whenever I had a paper in college, I would do it the night before because I did it best that way.
Really?
If I knew exactly how much time I had, I could do it that quickly. I had an 18-page paper to write for a history class. I had a history minor, and I started it 24 hours before it was due because I knew I could finish it, and I finished it 3 hours early.
But how?
I just stayed up that whole. That's how I work. And so if I go to my 9 to 5 job, most of my work is done from 4 to, or I guess I get out at 5:30. So like 3:30 to 5:30.
What are you doing the rest of the time?
Taking my time with it. It's just how I work. And so when I would write something, that's why I would write well at night, because I had to get to bed. So I'd write best from 11 to 12 rather than 9 to 11.
That's nuts.
For example.
But what about have you directed before?
I have only done it once, and it was sort of a lark.
Yeah, but like I was just wondering how that would translate to directing.
I wonder
like
too.
Nothing can be like
wait till the last minute. No.
Yeah, because you have all these scenes.
Yeah, I have imagined it because I know as you ramp up pre-production and the day comes where you're going to direct, I've imagined that day, and I'd be behind, and I'd be going on the tip of my toes, I guess. Like I'd fix things as they went.
Gotcha.
It's how I've edited. It's, I didn't have this. I guess I figure it out, and it ended up working.
Have you edited like last minute stuff?
Oh yeah. That Homeland thing I wanted to do back in the first season, I literally finished the day the series finale came out.
Were there like 7 seasons?
Yes. Now, of course, I mentioned there were issues where I didn't have a computer, but once
and
the
stuff got in the way, obviously. Yeah.
The pandemic started a month before that series finale, so I had a month where I realized that I could do it and had everything I could do it with. So I still took a month, and all of it got done the 3 days before the series finale. I didn't actually do it the other 27 days.
Yeah.
So I thought about it for 27 days, and then I did it.
So when you're thinking really quick,
but it was 36 hours straight.
When you're procrastinating, you think about it, like that never gives you motivation to start it?
No, because I've found, and I'm sure you've heard about this, when you sit down to write, you're like, oh, well, I needed to wash those dishes.
Zach Braff says it all the time.
Yeah.
Zach Braff sits down and I was like, oh, wait, I needed to go through my calendar. I needed to look at the music. I needed to You find ways to do everything but right.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow.
Yeah. I have little things I got to take care of on the computer. So I've said about having a to-do list that are priorities, that are things I need to get done by the end of the week and things that I need to get done eventually. Those things that I need to get done eventually are the things that I've been doing for 13 years.
Yeah.
Because clearly they're just things that are probably fun for me, not
I make a list every day of at work of like what needs to get done, because if I don't, I feel very lost.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait, what do I need to get? It's like you making lists or trying to remember, those talking points.
Mm-hmm.
I need a list because I will forget.
Mm-hmm.
So, this has been a great interview, a great time sitting with you, man. I appreciate you letting me come here and just talk, and we talk about a lot of really good stuff. Do you have any final words for any artists out there that may be struggling with writer's block or like working a 9 to 5 or as an artist? Like, do you have anything you would like to say? Any wisdom on upon people?
I guess this goes into where I was talking about I fell asleep while driving home. And also you said, is there anything you regret? It's when you're young, people will say to push yourself because that will get you the job or the next job. I think there's a point at which you need to realize your health is more important than anything else. And if you think that you're not being safe, especially with driving, that you need to step back and it's okay to say no to a job because the next job will come. I don't want to say in a way that it's like karma.
Yeah, but it will.
But I have found that when I said no to a job, 3 more came a week later. It also always comes in bunches where if you took a vacation for a weekend, that's when everyone needed you.
Oh, yeah.
But that is how you know these things will happen if you say no to a job that's not being safe.
Mm-hmm.
This film that I was falling asleep on was working everyone to death. And I've found those people on other jobs and they were like, that was the worst one I ever did. And the
because of what it was doing.
The film never even came out. So
that's even the worst.
Right. And so no one will hold you accountable for feeling like you were unsafe. And so that's the advice I give anyone that I find is just starting out. So if anyone's listening to this and thinks in a moment where they should have done what they thought was the right thing was to keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
Mentally and physically. So.
I love it, man. I love it. Thank you for hopping on. Once again, this is Tristian More, writer, creator, actor, soon to be director. Hope, right?
Someday, maybe.
Someday, maybe.
That was what I wanted to do as a kid, and I realized writing is what it actually is that I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to have made it in the first place. I don't mind if people... I'm not someone that wanted the words to be exact.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with any of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for hopping on, man. I appreciate you. And until next time, guys, this is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. Once again, this is Where Is My Mind, a podcast about mental health and the arts. I'm host and producer of the podcast, Christopher Orangeo. All episodes will be available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. Once again, this is Chris Orangeo, and thank you for supporting.